The Mountaintop Podcast show notes can be found at www.mountaintoppodcast.com, where you can also subscribe to the newsletter and get a 25-minute call with me for free. Also, you're invited to join the Mountaintop Summit Facebook group. Look forward to seeing you there.
Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
Okay, here we are again, gentlemen. Hope you're up for another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. You can find us at Scott McKay on Twitter, Real Scott McKay on Instagram, Scott McKay on Facebook, and of course at www.mountaintoppodcast.com. With me today is a friend of mine who I've known for several years now. She's actually a returning guest to this show, and I will tell you guys, her last show on how women like to be seduced is the #1 most downloaded episode of all time for the Chick Whisperer and the Mountaintop combined. So obviously you guys love Dr. Jennifer Rhodes from New York City, and we're pleased to have her back. And we have an extra special topic for you today, which is how to attract a strong, confident woman. And I know of no other person who would be better for tackling this particular topic than Dr. Jennifer Rhodes herself. So welcome.
Hi, it's so good to be back.
Yeah, it's good to hear your voice. Good to see you again. We were chit-chatting before we got started here. It's still a little chilly in the New York City area this time of year, and I won't bore you with the temperature here in San Antonio today. But hopefully you're cozied in and ready for a good, solid conversation on a topic that I think a lot of guys really struggle with, you know, Jennifer, because we all want a woman who is not suffering from bad self-esteem, who isn't broken in certain ways, such that many women and men are nowadays, of course. And yet the idea of a strong, confident woman is intimidating to a lot of those same men. Why do you think that is?
First of all, I just want to say that I'm really excited about this particular topic because I don't think we don't talk about it enough. I think that, you know, we've gotten so used to just talking about the negativity between the sexes that we actually don't sit down and actually talk about what it means to want a high-value woman or a high-value man. I don't, in general, like the word intimidation because I actually don't think men are intimidated by strong, confident women. I think what happens is when any of us, but when a woman is particularly out of balance between her own masculine and feminine energy, she emits an energy that actually can make a man feel disrespected, and in experiencing being disrespected, it can cause a whole lot of negativity that goes on in an interaction. And so he just becomes turned off. From an energetic perspective, what is happening is that so many of us are just out of balance with our own energy. So many women are out of balance with their own energy, and they're not accessing the kind of their more feminine energy. They're kind of coming into their communication style with more masculine energy, and it's just not conducive for good communication. So when there's not good communication, one or the other person's going to feel disrespected. And when we feel disrespected, then we're obviously not attracted to the other person. And then it just becomes a bad experience. And when we have bad experiences, until, you know, we have more just kind of life experience in general, we tend to take these things personally rather than see them from a larger perspective. And so then we can go down the rabbit hole of thinking that, you know, high value women are just too difficult to deal with, or high value women don't like us, or kind of get into that negative mindset when really it's probably a communication issue based on energy.
Well, several things here. First of all, you said that you're not so fond of the word intimidation, and I can understand that, but I would counter that thought with an opinion that there really are guys who lack strength and lack confidence themselves. So when they encounter a woman who's really quick on her feet and really sure of herself, I think if the word isn't intimidation, there is still something going on in that guy's mind where he says to himself, you know, I'm not ready for this. I can't handle her. She's going to embarrass me. She's going to, like you said, make me feel emasculated. And I'm not sure it's because she's masculine herself. It's just, damn it, you can't keep up with her because she's so smart, so strong, so confident. And I know for a fact a lot of those women really struggle in the dating pool because they're having a hard time finding a guy they can respect.
Yeah, so I hear you, but I also really, because I also work with women who are, especially if they're approaching the age of 40 and still single,
Right.
it's really, it really is an energetic thing and a lack of education. So a woman who is sitting in what we call divine feminine energy is someone who doesn't necessarily feel the need to try to emasculate someone else. Their energy is actually very receptive to all kinds of different men coming into their space. And then they, will say yes or no, and they will choose. I think what happens is in our culture in general, we overwork and don't take care of ourselves. Most of us and most of my clients have hormonal imbalances. We're kind of all operating in the world, not necessarily being our true authentic selves. And so then we're going to end up with all kinds of miscommunications. And then our interpretation of the miscommunications is, oh, he's intimidated by my success. He's intimidated by this. And when I work with women, that's a myth that has to go out the window because it's not intimidation. There are amazing, hugely successful women who are capable of just being in alignment with who they are that make it really easy for men to approach them. And so I do take issue with the term intimidation because I actually don't think it's true.
Well, I would agree that a lot of people, men and women, are more easily offended than ever. It's kind of being chalked up as a red badge of courage, ironically enough, in today's culture to be offended easily as if it's something righteous. And I really see it as weakness. So I think along with that goes a lot of this projection that you're talking about. Oh, you offended me, therefore you must be this kind of person. So women and men alike are dealing with someone who they perceive isn't responding to them as that person would have liked and thinking automatically there's something wrong with this other person, not me. I'm perfectly okay. A lot of women's dating advice, for the benefit of guys listening, you mentioned the word divine feminine. A lot of the dating advice out there is telling women there's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing to change. You're perfectly wonderful. You're a goddess. You're wonderful. It's all these men who have to change. You have to navigate all their problems. And I think that's simply appealing to the senses of people who aren't succeeding in the dating world because they're being selfish and they're being so inwardly focused, as you're saying, and selling them a continued mindset that's going to continue not to work for them. Now, I will also issue the caveat that most men's advice is not off the hook either, because it's all about, hey, we know women are the choosers and you're the chasers, and you've got to somehow get this woman who's getting approached 100 times a day to be tricked into choosing you instead of choosing someone else. And I think that's a completely low view of women, as if they're not able to make their own choices and do so based on a guy's attractiveness. And again, it seeks to let guys off the hook for having any responsibility for their own attractiveness to women. So in a world where men and women are quite literally being coached to think it's the other person's problem, the other gender's problem, it's really no accident, as it were, that we're hearing a lot of people talking about a war between the genders. And as much as you resent and don't agree with the term being intimidated by each other, I really resent the term a war between the genders, or a war on men, or a war on women, because I just think it's the wrong mindset. I think men and women were designed to be together. We're supposed to be on the same team. And when that war, that us versus them mindset is being fomented, nobody wins and nobody comes out looking strong or confident, because everybody indeed is trying to watch out for their own back. And it's, keep your hands off my stack. And that's just not a very good way to start a relationship, is it?
No, I think given what has happened over the past few years with the Me Too and Time's Up movement, I think that we have gotten, for understandable reasons, incredibly defensive. I also think that social media has not been helping, because now you can see something and you can automatically react without thinking things through. And I agree that I think the dating industry has actually potentially done more harm than good in terms of trying to give advice to people without suggesting that they have to go through their own individual journey and their own process to figure out who they actually are. I think that men and women would actually communicate better if everyone just accepted that some of us go on a longer journey and we have to come into full alignment with who we are. And some of us have an easier time because that's just the way it's going to go. And you either have just natural, really great social skills at a younger age, and you happen to meet someone at a younger age and things are easier. The judgment that is going on between the sexes is what is keeping everyone single. And I think it's particularly problematic. And I think it's going to keep people divided. And I think it's going to interfere, with marriages and, long-term relationships, because when you are surrounded by negativity, you absorb it and then you bring it into your social life. So I think right now I've been telling a lot of my clients to not read conventional dating advice on the internet, to get off of social media, because things are just so negative. It's not helpful right now.
Know this, all you guys who are listening. Good, solid dating advice is by definition self-development advice. Getting to the point where you're better with women or men, if you're a woman, or, whatever your sexual orientation is, same story, is all about becoming a better version of your authentic self to become more attractive and more confident and a stronger human being, to get over those obstacles, those roadblocks, those hidden detractors, even, as I call them, things you don't even know are going on with you that are keeping you from the success with the other gender that you'd like, keeping you from the results you would like. All of that can't be predicated by definition on a bunch of trickery or a bunch of quick fixes or pickup lines. It's got to be real work done in the midst of dealing with your real self at an authentic level. And that brings me back, Jennifer, to something I wanted to touch upon earlier. That's this idea of women being in their masculine and that being a turnoff or even being offensive to men, as you kind of described. And the question I wanted to pose is being strong and being confident necessarily gender specific? Is that part of masculinity as opposed to femininity? And I won't leave you hanging. I believe that confidence is not gender specific. I think you can be a feminine woman and be confident, and you can be a masculine man and be confident. And I think strength in terms of mental toughness and grit are also not gender specific traits. For example, in our family, we're raising confident, gritty little kids. These guys who listen to my show know that my daughter is a champion BMX racer like my son, and she straps a helmet on and goes and bangs bars with all the little girls, but she's got long hair and she loves pink and purple things, and her buddies she races with are playing with Beanie Boos after the race. Meanwhile, all the little guys are going to play in the dirt and firing Nerf guns at each other. I think the strength, the confidence, the belief in your own competence, and the ability to not be a weakling in terms of your decision making or your ability to stand up to the challenges that life throws at you are not necessarily unique to either gender's chemistry in terms of what's sexually attracted to each other. So this whole idea of being a strong, confident woman, I think a lot of guys get mixed up because they're thinking, okay, well, I'm looking for some macho chick. But it's kind of like men aren't supposed to be vulnerable. Well, a pox on that, because vulnerability in many ways is strength. I mean, if you're a opossum trying to cross the street, you're vulnerable in a very negative way. If you're a guy who decides to grab a pear and go talk to that woman, even though she may reject you, yes, you're making yourself vulnerable in that potential social interaction, but that was an act of courage and strength that caused you to do that. You see what I'm flowing here?
Yes. So I have a lot to say about this topic, mostly because I think that the first mistake that we have in our culture is not understanding when people refer to masculine and feminine energy, there is not a context for the history behind the reason why professionals will discuss that. The issue that is really going on specifically in the United States is that for at least the past, probably a couple hundred years, maybe longer than that, we have valued masculinity and masculine energy over what most people would describe as feminine energy. And the difference between the two is that feminine energy is strong and it's receptive. But in our manifesting culture where we go and tell people you can go do whatever you want, if you go out and get it, is actually valuing masculine energy over feminine energy. So what has happened is women over the past 100 years have entered the workforce in order to, deal with the gender dynamics of going into work. women have had to learn to be more masculine in order to deal with those dynamics and have lost access to activities and lost mentors and lost the women in their family teaching how to sit in your feminine energy. So have become unbalanced. The majority of women are definitely unbalanced with regard to their balance between their own masculine and feminine energy. Our entire culture is a little over the top on the masculine side. What happens is when we are over the top on the masculine side, like too much masculine energy in someone who's not supposed to be kind of that level of masculine energy by who they really are, is going to not attract the type of person that they're looking for. So I think that that's part of like what is going on in terms of there's just like a lack of understanding and education behind what actual feminine energy looks like. And in our culture, we tend to think of it as weak. And if you look at the history of feminine energy throughout thousands of years and many different cultures, it was actually something worshipped and it's considered divine. That most of the cultures actually put feminine energy above masculine energy in terms of its strength and wisdom. So it's like the grandmothers sitting in their community were known and respected for the divine feminine energy because of their strength and wisdom. And that paired well with divine masculine energy, which is about leadership and kind of, stepping up and being a leader. But if everyone is exhibiting the same kind of energy, then we're going to have a problem balancing each other out. And so I agree with you that this whole process really is a personal development process, because what culture is telling you that you need to become is probably not who you authentically are, and you have to go down the journey to figure it out.
What do you think of the current wave of feminism and the quest to increase the amount of masculine energy women are taking for themselves, even as they're telling men that their masculinity is toxic and they should stop being bad guys? Because what I've noticed is men are being told that they should be more feminine and stop all masculinity because it's all toxic. Meanwhile, women are being told be more assertive, fight for your rights. You need to go to work. You need to climb the corporate ladder. You have AOC out there saying, hey, ladies, stop having babies. Other people also kind of flying this flag that, hey, look, this is all about getting paid the same as men. That's why, according to them, we're going to need things like government paid childcare so women can all go to work. There's this de-emphasis on child rearing and raising children. And I agree with you. I think somehow it's become a sign of weakness to want to be a mother, to raise children upright, and children are our future. Children are the world. I agree with you, as an aside here. I do want to hear what you have to say on that. But as a preamble to be handing the mic back to you, I do want to say that I also am on record frequently as saying I believe femininity is the higher calling. Women bring joy, fun, comfort, nurturing to this world, which is what we all live for on weekends. Men, as the providers, protectors, enablers of that femininity, get to be the recipients of that divine feminine, as you would call it. And I would agree with you 100,000%, if that's possible, that historically femininity has been treated with a lot more respect, and I think fairly so, than it has nowadays. But see, I would lay that at the feet of a certain movement of people who are trying to turn women into more masculine creatures at the expense of valuing their own femininity.
So we could talk a little bit about my personal experience. I identify as being feminist, but the way that I define feminist is that the women in my family have fought for my right to choose how I live my life. Right. Which is not the movement that is going on right now. And I actually get very concerned with young women in their 20s when I go to panels and they're talking about equal pay and all these things, and they're very aggressive and, in quotes, masculine about blaming men for the issues that are going on in the workplace. And so therefore that's going to translate into their personal life as well.
Before you continue, I don't usually interrupt my guests, but I think this is important because it's just one line. Blaming is never a position of strength. If you're blaming people, you're being weak, not being strong. And I think that's something that a lot of people in this culture need to wrap their head around. Please continue.
So when I see these young women who are very passionate about trying to make change, we've been here before and we're not learning our lesson. If you look at the history of the women's rights movement and the feminist movement, there were people who very early on in the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s who started raising questions as to whether or not the movement was going in the right direction. And it speaks to the issue of trying to tell women to be more masculine. And I believe that our devaluing of human relationships in general and not valuing what we bring to the table as women is not only damaging to our needs in terms of wanting to speak our truth and bring a voice to it. It's causing a huge divide between men and women that is not going to be easily restored. So I'm actually very concerned where this movement is going, because I think it's causing anger and a deep division that is going to take probably decades to recover from. And I think it's really stirring the pots in ways that could have some pretty negative repercussions. And I think we're seeing some of that, but I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. Part of that is just developmentally, when you're in your 20s, you kind of think you know everything. And when you get a little bit older, then you have a little bit more wisdom. But there's really no one mentoring younger men or women on kind of how to handle these communication issues. And when I start seeing the recommendations to not focus on having families or not focus on relationships in general, I get very concerned, because there are people who are here to have healthy families and relationships, and that makes the world a better place because that's what they're here to do. And then there are people here who are supposed to do something with their career and possibly not have, get married and have a traditional family, and that's what they're here to do. But when we start telling people exactly how to live their life or how to be in this world, that's concerning. It's not giving permission for people to find their own path.
Yeah, it's as if something other than heterosexual procreation is responsible for furthering the human race in the future. Go figure.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I want to mention a frequently cited poll done by Vox several years ago that I think illuminates this discussion a little bit. They polled people, men and women, and said, do you believe that women should get equal pay for equal work, that they should get equal rights, and basically describe tenets of feminism as it was designed to be in the beginning. And 85% or some number agreed with that. You have to be some kind of bad person to think women should continue to be oppressed going forward, of course, right? Then they said, do you identify as a feminist? And if my memory serves, only 18% of people said, yes, I identify as a feminist. So essentially, feminism in its current iteration has a branding problem.
Yes.
And yet, what you're seeing, as often happens in today's culture, is the spin doctors get involved with this. They're a few chess moves ahead of the zeitgeist of everybody else out there, and they start manipulating the terms to suit whatever agenda they're trying to drive. So if you say you're not a feminist, then they're going to go, what? You don't believe in equal rights for women and that women should vote and equal pay for equal work? And then, you're kind of cornered because that's what feminism is. But then they take feminism as a movement. Let's call it feminism with a capital F, as I've said before. And then they drive all sorts of anti-male agenda with that. And you're forced to carry signs around that say the future is female and agree that, every cisgendered male out there is a bad person. And you're going, wait a minute, I am a cisgendered male person. How did I get roped into believing this and having to parrot this agenda word for word when all I really mean is I think women should get equal pay for equal work and that they're every bit as worthy of rights and respect as any man out there. And I think that's where the danger happens, is when the agenda that's just a little bit under the surface and driven by people who know what they're doing and are well practiced at the rhetoric they're going to use to help change this wave of how people feel out there. Once those people get rolling and they start seeing some success, it's hard to stop that momentum. And that's what you're seeing on Twitter, because Twitter, I think, is going to be the end of human civilization as we know it. That and dating apps, by the way. And I don't know how we go back from it. But you have all the angry people controlling the narrative. And when you have angry people ranting and complaining and living in their echo chambers together and helping other people get angry, because, people are pissed off pretty easily. It's natural entropy of human emotion, if you will. When that happens, it's easy to believe everybody thinks this. You're seeing each political party radicalized to the right and to the left, respectively, because they're listening to people on Twitter. And those are the angry people. Meanwhile, Jennifer, you've got a vast majority, millions upon tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people, I would argue, in this country who are perfectly okay with the other gender. Men who like women, women who like men. So they have better things to do than even get in on this conversation. They're not even concerned about it. So the angry people control the narrative, and people are like, well, I guess. I mean, I really don't have anything. I haven't thought about it much. And then here we are. So what goes around comes around. We're left with a bunch of men who don't want weak-willed women who hate men and who don't have any self-esteem, but we don't even know what we're looking for anymore when we're identifying women who are strong and confident. And you use the term high value almost synonymously with the topic du jour, which I found fascinating, by the way. I didn't even mention that yet. But you're a man and you want a good partner in life. You want someone who's not broken. You want someone who's mentally healthy. You want someone who likes herself and believes in herself and believes in her ability to contribute to the world and isn't constantly looking for problems or looking for reasons to be offended. So how on earth does a guy even know who the hell he's looking for in a woman? I mean, are we looking for masculine traits? Is that okay? I mean, I'm not turned on by masculinity because masculinity and femininity are the very building blocks of sexual attraction. I mean, femininity is what turns me on, yet I'm being told that women are becoming more masculine and that's a virtuous thing, but I don't necessarily need a woman who's able to man up vis-a-vis who I am and be more of a man than I am.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a real issue, but I think that there's also opportunity. I think right now there's huge opportunity for men, smart men, to kind of begin to learn to assess social situations in a different way. I think that when a woman is really grounded in who she really is and is naturally more masculine, but is in her balanced state, that is different than someone who is kind of playing that role and learning the difference between energetically feeling that out when you are in her presence is kind of what the superpower is going to be for the future. You know, if you begin to look at where neuroscience is going, neuroscience is talking about energy. The ancient yogis have been talking about energy for thousands of years. You can actually read the energy of someone to figure out if they are balanced or not balanced. And I think that what is necessary is looking beyond the superficial as to whether or not you think that she's really attractive or not, and beginning to wonder, what does she do to take care of herself and to find a balanced state? So becoming more interested in, does she have things outside of work? You know, how does she, handle her life? What does she do for fun? What kinds of things does she do for joy? Because the woman who doesn't have any of those things in her life is going to be way tipped over on the masculine energy side because all she's doing is working. It's probably not a good fit for most men. And she needs to go down her path of self-development to figure out how to balance herself out. And I bring this up specifically in the United States because if you begin to travel outside the United States, people do not live this way. I just spent like 3 months in Buenos Aires.
Oh boy, yeah. I mean, hello, that's masculinity, femininity capital with the tango and everything. You betcha.
It is, but they're also going through some major shifts because of Me Too. And so the way that men and women have been interacting is very different than they may have interacted, 10, 15 years ago. But you don't hear the complaining about it. Men have just adjusted their strategy.
How long were you in Buenos?
I was there almost 3 months.
So you're obviously not a vegetarian.
No, I thought that there is a vegan movement in Buenos Aires right now.
Well, those people have to be out of their mind. I don't think a vegan would last 20 minutes in Buenos. I mean, Buenos Aires, Argentina in general, okay? The southern part of South America, pretty much. I mean, Uruguay and Chile to some degree also have unbelievable beef. I mean, it's just absolutely delectable, incredible, and it's dirt cheap. Compared to like going to like Morton's Steakhouse here and spending a couple $100, you can get something that good at lunch for like $8. It's just absolutely
And your
amazing.
bottle of wine will cost you $6, and it's really amazing. So
yeah, it'll be great wine too. Yeah, no question. Right. Yeah. If you're a teetotaler and a vegan, just stay away. Right. But I don't want to get off track. But like you, I agree that anyone who travels will see that masculinity and femininity is an international language, kind of like mathematics. It just is what it is. And to try to pretend it isn't there is ridiculous.
No, I agree with you. It's ridiculous. But I also think that other cultures are handling these transitions better. And I think it's because the people in other cultures value taking care of themselves in ways that Americans don't value, right? So if you go to Europe or you go to Buenos Aires, they have other things in their culture that balances them out. There's passion and there's joy, and then there's a great respect for their family. And I think that we as a culture in the United States, when we're struggling so much with men and women getting along, need to take a step back and begin to think about what is it that we actually value? What is it that we want our lives to look like? And let that drive the decision-making in our dating life rather than just trying to follow a bunch of rules on a checklist about how to get someone to sleep with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you just really are not going to get to where you want to go, especially if you're looking for a high value partner, if you can't think about what it is that you actually really want your life to look like.
When I ask guys the appropriate questions to help them set up their online dating profiles, one of the things I challenge them to do is to think of everything you value that's feminine and virtuous in a woman. Think of real examples. Women you've known, women you've seen on TV, women you've dated even. What did they do that was so endearing to you, that was feminine? Where was that feminine energy? Give me examples of ways that you really love it, things that endeared you. And what is it about a woman who is virtuous that really just sets your heart on fire? I mean, what kind of woman is she? What is her personality like? What values does she have? And Jennifer?
Yes.
The vast majority of men, they got nothing. They can't give me a single example. They're just looking for women who have a pretty face and a nice ass. And I think that's really scary.
Yeah, it's really scary. I get the same thing from women. I mean, when I ask female clients, to go through the same thing, but I'm looking for divine masculine qualities, I get height and I get money. Income. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So it's like we're all operating on this baby level. It's like baby soul level of like what we're looking for. And yet we think we deserve to find our soulmate. It's like, okay, well, if you want that level of a partner and that relationship, you have a lot of personal growth to do to get there because you're not seeing the larger picture.
People are begging for a transactional, quote unquote, relationship. I mean, The rich guy gets a woman who's arm candy. It's a bargain. They strike with each other. It's a business deal. I mean, there's no depth. There's no such thing as getting each other. There's no such thing as connection anymore. I released a program on how to be more connectable with people you'd like to date. And it confused my entire audience. And I mean, I got the high value, high character, smart, intelligent guys I talked to. The guys listening to this show, they're the guys who value that. But I'm going to issue a challenge to all you guys who are listening. Can you tell me what it is you love and appreciate about members of the other gender, namely women, other than that they're sexy and they look good and they're nice to have sex with and that you'd like to get laid sometime? I mean, know this, just like you would feel used and disrespected if a woman came to you and said, oh, well, you're only 5'10.5" now, you're not 6 feet, I'm rejecting you. Or if she said, are you a guy who has a net worth of at least $2 million? Oh, you don't? All right, well, never mind. Wouldn't you just feel completely disrespected and like you're dealing with someone who's just being shallow and I'll just use the word stupid? Well, if you have no value for a woman other than her physical sexuality, I mean, not only are women going to feel disrespected and reject you, and a lot of you guys, I just gave you your breakthrough. Whether you like it or not, you may turn off this podcast and never listen to me again. But if you're thinking of women only for the purposes of having sex, don't complain to me that you're getting rejected by them, because under there, they're still just as human as you. Gentlemen, I promise you a woman's DNA is closer to yours than a chimpanzee's. Promise. Okay? Run the studies scientifically if you want, but I promise you women are still human. I had a guy leave a comment on one of my videos or something where he said, you're lying to men. You represent everything that's wrong because you're not taking sides. You're not warning men about how horrible women are, and you're this blue pill guy, and you're an enemy to men. Why, Jennifer? Because I actually like and respect women, and I think women and men should be on the same side and actually relate to each other, as we're designed to be. But that's what it's come to. You got guys hanging a shingle as red pill dating coaches. What in holy hell does a guy who's trying to go his own way as a MGTOW need with a dating coach? If women are the enemy, stay away from them. If, things are really bad for men because women are driving this narrative that's, you're never going to get anywhere. It's not even worth pursuing. Yet this is where we are. And I'll tell you, Jennifer, I think it's time to put a punctuation mark on this particular show by getting your thoughts on what it is we as men should do to lead, to get the attention and build relationships with said strong, confident, high-value women. Riff on it. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell a brief personal interaction that I've had, because in the past, I don't know what to say, because I'm single and dating right now, the past 2 weeks, I've had to reject a number of men because their approach was very much equivalent to being incredibly disrespectful. And I will choose to sit and have a conversation with these men because most of the time it's coming from a lack of education. So one of the reasons why I brought up Buenos Aires a little bit is because it's a chapter in my book, because in that city years ago, when people were learning the tango, men were learning it because there were fewer women in the city, and dancing was the only way that you can go meet a woman. The way that they were learning it, though, was it would be like 3 years of training, and you had to learn the follower's role first. So you were actually getting exposed to how do you surrender, how do you be receptive, and how do you actually touch and feel another human being before you learn to lead. And I think that we have a huge problem where both men and women don't actually take any interest in actually learning how the opposite sex processes information or how they want to be interacted with. So this is why we have men thinking that women just reject everyone and women thinking all men are super aggressive. It's because our experience is that 9 out of 10 times we've had to deal with an asshole or a jerk coming up and saying something really inappropriate. Most women have had very negative experiences interacting with men, especially if it's in a major city. And you have to have some sensitivity to not taking her defensiveness personally. The man who can actually roll with emotions and understand that whatever you're getting is not necessarily about you, is going to be the person who's going to be able to open the doorway to starting a real connection and a real conversation. And we talk about this in the dance community all the time. And still the reason why I send all my male clients to learn to dance, because most men don't have access to understanding what sensuality is. They don't know actually how to touch a woman. When they do have sex, I see couples, the biggest complaint in couples therapy is either lack of sex or that, she's not getting her romance needs met and he's not getting enough of it. And it's because there's still no connection, even if they're a married couple. Everyone needs to just stop, and they need to accept the fact that you have to go learn about the opposite sex before you start asking for your own needs to be met, which is the reason why I still think seduction as a social skill is incredibly helpful, because it is the one social skill that really teaches you it is not about you. So smart men right now have an opportunity. They can go and they can take a break and they can begin to learn, why are all these women so upset and what can I do differently so I don't get added to that group of men that they're pissed off at. It's a real opportunity for really great men who are good with emotions to come in and kind of be the hero to save the day.
You're a wild woman. You're on fire. I mean, I'm hesitant to have you stop talking. I want to hear more, but unfortunately we're running out of time. I think you just hit the nail on the head so hard that it may blast through the other side of the world. Like, there's a nail flying through the other side of China or something right now. And that was amazing. And I think coming from a woman, it means a lot, because these guys have heard very similar things to what you said from me before, but you used different words and had that different perspective of being a woman that just really, really underscores it. So thank you for that on behalf of all these guys. Gentlemen, women live in fear. because they're not as strong as men. Most men can beat up most women. Now, my wife is taking Krav Maga, so she's soon going to be an exception. But I'm telling you, you don't know what it's like to go out on a date with someone who could get aggressive with you. It's not fun. And women are a little shy about this stuff because it's happened to them before. The difference is smart, successful, strong, confident women are stopping short of saying all men are horrible. Just like we as men should never lay at the feet of an entire gender our bad experiences with a select handful of women. It's immature and it's dead wrong. So you as a man have the freedom to say, hey, look, I am trying to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. I want to be a good man of character. Yes, you may mess up. We've all done things we regret. That doesn't make us monsters. It doesn't make us rapists. And when smart, successful people who get it meet other people who are like that, generally speaking, Jennifer, we're all going to be a little less offended than maybe those people who don't think so much about things and have that knee-jerk, defensive, easily offended response to it. And I think you're right. I think a lot of this has to do with us stopping our selfishness in its tracks. And listen, society has really been pointing us towards being self-absorbed since the end of World War II, frankly. So it's no wonder that today's kids, in a world where generally, there's bad things that happen, of course, but in a world where we generally live a pretty charmed life, we're looking for things to be offended about and angry about and things not to like because that's human nature. And really, it's like the old Pogo cartoon. These guys don't probably even know who the hell Pogo is. It was before my time. But the most famous Pogo cartoon strip that was written said, "We have seen the enemy and it is us." That's a line attributed to that comic strip. And it's becoming more and more the reality. Gentlemen, women aren't the enemy. They're your partner. They're who you're supposed to go out and populate the world with. It isn't us versus them. And I think you've said some beautiful things on this particular podcast, Jennifer, and I appreciate your perspective on that. And I want to give these guys a chance to go to your website and find you. And they can do that by going to www.mountaintoppodcast.com/Rhodes, just like a Rhodes Scholar, which is a great, great surname for someone who's a doctor.
Thank you.
Good job on that, Dr. Jennifer Rhodes. And RHODES, just in case you're not a Rhodes Scholar and, we're about to write ROADS, like I may have. RHODES is what you're going to put there. And when they get to your site, Dr. Jennifer Rhodes, what are they going to find?
You can find actually a place where you can sign up for my newsletter. There's also some recent videos related to my opinion about the Me Too movement that are really from much more of a male perspective that caused a little bit of controversy that they might be interested in. And then they can keep an eye out for my forthcoming book called Toxic Insecurity,
which is a title I love. See, instead of toxic masculinity, toxic femininity, I like to talk nowadays about toxic stupidity. And you're talking about toxic insecurity, and I think that is at least an equally valid concept. Wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you again for joining us for a second time, Jennifer. You're charming as always, and I'm sure these guys are going to love this episode as much as they loved the first.
Thank you for having me. It was so much fun.
Yeah, likewise. And gentlemen, it's time to go ahead and head over to www.mountaintoppodcast.com. Talk to me free for 25 minutes about what's going on with women. What's going on with the results you're either getting or not getting with women in this life of yours. This podcast may have left your head spinning. You may be angry. You may be thinking that I'm inaccurate in what I'm saying. You may be thinking Dr. Jennifer Rhodes isn't accurate in what she's saying because your situation is different. Guys, it's all about what we do as leaders, and sometimes we're getting exactly what we're bargaining for. If you want the difference to be made in your life where you start attracting high-quality women of character, high-value women, as Jennifer was saying, strong, confident women, women who aren't going to burn you, women who aren't going to embarrass you in public, women who are going to be your partner instead of your adversary, it's time to get in touch with who the hell you are and who the hell you want, and I can help you with that. Get in touch with me by going to www.mountaintoppodcast.com, and I'll be looking forward to talking to you. You'll find when we get on the phone, I'm exactly the dude you think I'm going to be. I'm not playing a fictional character on this podcast. So if you resonate with what's going on here, get to www.mountaintoppodcast.com and, of course, get on the newsletter if you aren't already. It's free. And until I talk to you again, either in person or on the next episode, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.